Welcome back to the shop again this week, you guys. Going to go in a little bit of a different direction. Was checking out some old bows that are hanging on my rack of abandoned efforts and different things that I keep out here in the garage, and I came across a bow that I'm going to go ahead and try and take up again and see what we can make happen with it. This particular blank interesting is the fact that it's got to be about probably 10 years old, if not more so than that. This would be prior to my use of power lambs, number one. Number two, there is no taper or pre-tiller to these limbs prior to the glue up. So that is no longer, or that's not an instance in place here. The grip itself is just a block glued straight onto the belly at its normal thickness, which if you guys ever struggle with your block popping off your bow, this is usually the reason why it happens. It is white oak for the belly and it is hickory for the backing. So, you know, for materials purposes, really common type materials. The width of it, right from the get, is only 1 1/8 inch thick, or wide rather. So challenging in that aspect. The thickness on here, 1/2 inch thick belly, 1/8 inch on the backing, and the height of this thing is 70 inches. So it'll make a 68 inch bow. So in that regard, we're kind of lucky that there's not going to be a ton of strain on these limbs to get to 28 inches, but the construction methods leave a little bit to be desired. One last thing as well, during this period of time when I was making bows, I was not yet using epoxies. So here again, I've talked a lot about using EA40 in the bows that I build. This one is put together with Titebond, and I would tell you that it is likely Titebond 2, because I don't think I was playing with Titebond 3, or that it was even available, widely available at the time that I put this together. So this should be an interesting build. Follow along with me. We'll get started. All right, I'm going to try and highlight how the wood removal is working out right now. So at most I've had a long string on this just to kind of give it a once over to see how we're bending. And I don't know if you can tell in the light how this is working out, but here's that limb profile. You can see I've taken the corners off, and then after each run I come back and flatten out the belly all the way to the tip. Now, as a result of doing that, hopefully you can see that we're getting narrower down here at the tip, where the thickness is just a little bit more so than the backing. And as we come along up here toward the grip, we're all the way back up to full thickness of 1/2 inch. All right, it's getting a nice even taper down to that tip. Now as I address it against my sander, I will sand in my edges, but as I'm sanding away the tip, I'll sand like the first third really good, like a run on the first third, and then a run to 1/2 limb, and then a run all the way to full limb, and take a couple runs off the full limb this way to kind of get everything married together and start working out this taper that we've got going on right here. Okay, so that's the reduction method I'm involved in right now. Now you could certainly trade out for rasps, like a farrier's rasp here. This would take wood off very quickly. A regular Nicholson rough rasp here to do the same work, right? That we could run off our edges and then start at the tip, removing, and every time we remove all the way to the tip as we move further up the limb, all the way to the tip, so that we're getting just that little bit more removal out toward that edge here, and then you know that you've got a good taper the whole way down. And you want to monitor that as you go along. So as you're floor tillering, you want to ensure that you're not starting to create a whip tiller situation out here at the end. You want even bend from here out to here. Okay, so here are some very initial bends. And I can tell just from the onset, so there's kind of the view down the length there, and trying to get it all to fit into the viewfinder here. The limb on the right over here is clearly stronger than this one here, and I can feel that in floor tillering as well. So we'll do a little more removal on here. The whole thing is still a little bit stout. I can't pull it just far enough to get to what would be a brace height. So I'm going to kind of focus on this one to bring it into compliance with the left side there, and then continue to remove on both limbs to get a little easier bend going. Okay, so I've got a long string on her again here. The limbs seem to be bending evenly, at least evenly enough. We take a look at it from one tip to the other tip, and then just kind of judge the distance here. We're getting kind of close to a string height that we can put this on. So getting close to brace. My advice on doing this sort of thing is to, floor tiller it to where it feels like it's in the neighborhood of the weight of bow that you want to make. So we're shooting for 50 pounds here. And it feels a little bit like somewhere in the neighborhood of a 60-pound bow if we were to draw it out to 28 inches. So I'm right in the neighborhood. Enough at least to where we can expect some weight to drop simply in the exercising of the limbs, number one. We can expect the weight to drop through the tillering process, etc. So here we are. I think we're in the neighborhood. Going to do just a little bit more exercising on these limbs. Unfortunately, it's very cold outside, so I don't have the value of my tillering tree, just the stick for right now. But I'm going to try and at least get it to brace height to a point where I can sweat it off a little bit, right? Leave it braced for a good half hour and let the limbs start working around some compression and develop their true shape. All right, kind of like I've described, guys, we were taking our edges off here along the length of the limbs. You can kind of see in the shadow of the light where I've taken that edge off. I've continued that edge up to the riser space here, so you can see I've got a nice edge here that rides from my riser and into the limb itself. This is all in an attempt to try and preserve this riser block from popping off. Now, you'll notice that the original glue line is still here, so we have not yet married it completely, but also we have not taken any wood off of the original thickness of this limb, at least all the way up here at the grip. Now, removal does start already in here, so we've got this kind of thinned out from there. And then one last thing I want to make sure we're all very clear on, or at least paying attention to. That is that I've got 2.5 inches of setback to start. All right, so that's really kind of how we're going to measure the stress that these limbs are taking. All right, we are strong. You can see that we are really pretty stiff through the center. So if I were to focus right here, you wouldn't necessarily know that we're strung. And as I move back here, then you can see the bend in those limbs. This is, I guess, kind of the benefit of the longer limbs. We'll say for right now, benefit of longer limbs. As the tillering process moves along on this bow, it will be a matter of getting that bend into this area as much as we can. There's really going to be the goal here. But from a side edge view, you can really kind of see that these limbs seem to be bending reasonably evenly. And the brace height is not quite that high. It's probably 4.5, 5 inches off the grip there. This is the point, though, on any bow, where you want to really kind of size up the alignment of your limbs, and really turn all efforts to straightening this thing out right from the onset of the tillering process, at least at the point where you've got it strung. It looks to me, to begin with, that the string's lying a little bit to the one side of the grip. And you can manipulate this, of course, based on string angles. So you're just going to have to, or the camera angle. But holding it flat and looking down its length, it looks like more handle resides on the right-hand side of that string than on the left. So this is where we'll narrow the tips in a direction to move the string, the direction on the limbs that we want to do. Because this is going to be corrected by narrowing the tips just right. Limbs aren't twisting; they're just misaligned is all. We've been sweating off weight here for about a half hour. Bend still seems to be reasonable considering its relatively low brace height. Find out how much stress we're under. We're at like 2 3/8 inch. We lost about an 1/8 inch of setback there. So that is not very much stress being put on that limb or on those limbs in so far. We've only lost about an 1/8 inch, or caused about an 1/8 inch of set, if even that much. So given that that is where we're at the moment, we're going to let this guy rest for the time being, and then we will get started on the actual tillering process. So we're in really pretty good shape here to get started on this thing. Guys, thanks for hanging out with me. This is turning out to be a pretty interesting little project for an old bow blank. So we will reconvene here next time around. So thanks for hanging out with me this week, you guys. I will see you again soon.